This is the video tutorial for the Happy Days Easter egg bag with bunny ears. It's been designed to hold a 97-gram Easter egg in its box. You'll need to cut 2 linings and 2 outers, 2 small pieces of ribbon and a longer piece of ribbon. And this is how we make it. With your fabric right sides up, so you're looking at the pretty side, measure 17 centimetres from this tip and make a mark as I've done, and do exactly the same for this side, and this is where we'll be putting our ribbon holders. Take one of your small ribbon pieces and fold it in half. If you are using patterned ribbon, as I am, make sure you're looking at the pattern. And then place it centrally on that line. And add a clip. And repeat as I've done for this side. Now I'm going to carefully tack into place very close to the edge. You won't see these stitches in the final make. I've tacked both my ribbons in place. Next I'm going to take the other front and I'm going to place it on top, right sides together. I'm placing the fabrics pretty side to pretty side. Make sure that I've lined up all the sides and the edges. And now I'm going to add some clips. I've added my clips, and as you can see I've also added a few pins. This is just to hold the fabric a bit steady as I'm sewing it. Now I'm going to sew it using a 1/4 inch seam allowance and starting at the top, sew all the way down to the bottom and stop. Sew across the very bottom and stop, and sew all the way up here and stop. I won't be sewing in the box corners, and I won't be sewing in the triangle part. I've sewn all along this side, along the bottom, and all along this side. I'm now going to box the corners. Before you start your box corners, press open your seams, as I've done. Then pop your finger in the gap and then ensure that this seam and the bottom seam line up and it's nice and straight across. And when you're happy with that, pop in a couple of clips. Next, once we've done that, we take it over the sewing machine and simply sew right across. I've sewn all the way down using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that's my one box corner finished, and I'm going to repeat the whole process for this side. That's both my box corners finished, and now I'm going to turn it the right way out. I've turned it the right way out, and I've also pressed open this seam and this seam. I'm now going to put it to one side while I work on the lining. We're now working on the lining. Place your 2 lining fabrics right sides together, so pretty side to pretty side. Line up all the sides and edges, and as we did before, add some clips along all the sides. I've added my clips, and I've also added my gap sign to remind me to leave a gap for turning later. As we did before, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to sew all the way along and stop, leave a gap, start again, stop, all along the bottom and stop, and then back along this side and stop. I won't be sewing in the box corners or this triangle part. I've sewn all along, leaving my gap down this side, along the bottom, and all the way along this side. I'm now going to box my corners, and in exactly the same way as we did before. It helps if you've pressed open your seam as well as I've done. And once again we've got to match this seam and the bottom seam up and get it all nice and straight. And then add a couple of clips. I'm now going to take it over the sewing machine, use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, sew all the way across. That's my one corner done, and now I'm going to repeat the whole process for the other corner. That's both my box corners done. Now I'm going to leave the lining the wrong way. The next stage is to place your outer, which is turned the right way, inside your lining, which is still turned the wrong way. I placed my outer inside my lining so it's pretty side to pretty side, and I've added clips all the way around, joining the outer to the lining. I'm now going to take it over the sewing machine and use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, sew all the way around. Take your time with this, don't rush. Carefully sewn all the way around, joining the outer to the lining, and I've also very carefully snipped the corners off my points at the top to reduce bulk, and also in the V shape both sides. I'm now going to turn it the right way out through the gap I left. I've turned it the right way out through the gap, and I've pushed out the corners of the ears. I've also folded in the raw edge of the gap, and I'm now going to take it over the sewing machine and sew all the way along, closing up the gap. You could of course sew this by hand if you prefer. I've pushed the lining inside and I've pressed it, and as you can see I've added my ribbon. The next step is to add our lovely treats.